You're on StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. 12 years after the Eeelam War IV, in which the Sri Lankan armed forces defeated the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam in May 2009, the Sri Lankan nation as a whole has moved on, has progressed considerably, and yet there are some lingering doubts as well as lingering issues that still pop up once in a while internationally and domestically in Sri Lanka. To review what has happened in these past 12 years since the war ended, I have with me Dr. Harinda Vidhanage, my old friend from Colombo and academic of repute, who now is the head of the Department of Defense and Strategic Studies in the Defense University in Colombo. Harinda, welcome and pleasure to see you again after some time actually on
Yes,
this.
Thank you, Nitin. I feel the same. We connected. Glad to be on your channel again.
Thank you. So, as I was saying in the introduction, it's been 12 years since the war ended, the civil war. It had ravaged the country, but it ended, even if violently, in May 2009. Since then, when you look back, how has Sri Lanka dealt with the aftermath of the war, and where do we stand currently as far as the reconciliation process, rehabilitation process, and of course, development is concerned?
Yeah, I think Sri Lanka has gone through a phase. I call it the 10+2 phase because 10 years after the war and the last 2 years, Sri Lanka has experienced things. It's totally shocked. With the Easter Sunday attacks in 2019 to 2020, so it's been 2 years since that, and then to face COVID-19 and then we actually entering the most crucial phase in Sri Lanka as well. So the last 2 years has been unprecedented for Sri Lanka. I think globally that's unprecedented, but I think 2019 was a turning point. We experienced Islamist and extremist violence in Sri Lanka. But going back, the Sri Lanka post-conflict Sri Lanka, I think we were all looking forward for the government at that time wanted to quickly give the tangible benefits of the end of the war to the public. So the dominant approach of 2009 government of Mahinda Rajapaksa was to provide tangible benefits. So it was basically driven on the development mantra. So reconstruction, rehabilitation, that was kind of the mantra that the government thought was the most prudent way. And that was the approach. So even reconciliation was through development, establishment of infrastructure, trying to change the livelihoods of the North and East people, as well as to give the South also the benefits of that particular development. That ended with 2015. 2015 was that particular turning point where there was this idea that Sri Lankan, there was a political viewpoint that we have to be more democratic, more liberal, more transparent. So that was the formula that made the good governance regime, the administration. So my idea is, that on book, theoretically sounds very good, but Sri Lanka's drift towards good governance came when the exact mechanisms and the political elites were failing even in the geopolitical West. Right? You had a very tumultuous last few Obama years, which led to rise of Trump. You saw the beginning of, to a certain extent, the disintegration of the EU, especially with the Brexit, and also you can see the so-called right-wing drift in Europe. And I'm not taking it in a negative term. That's people speaking. Sure. People were fed up with the so-called global institutions and certain norms and principles of the neoliberal principles. And at that particular turning point, when there was a recession of liberal democratic institutionalism and functionalism, Sri Lanka went towards it. So we started going there when the actual foundations were shaking. So that resulted in itself that good governance regime falling apart. And
there was a contradiction between the emergence of good governance paradigm in Sri Lanka and the failing of good governance elsewhere.
Globally, as well as it was clearly shown when the presidency and the prime minister officers began clashing. So the fundamental ethos of good governance were lost in the way they operationalized, and that culminated, peaked, and you can see the peak of when how that the response towards Easter Sunday attacks. It
That's
showed
right.
the utter failure of that particular the formula. So Sri
Sure.
Lanka unfortunately went from a tangible kind of development reconstruction into kind of ideological phase, and the ideological phase had no real physical foundation. So that is
Exactly.
why that particular crash. So that and then to add the third point, Nitin, from 2015 onwards, Sri Lanka started experiencing the rapidly turbulent neighborhood as well as the shock and awe of the geopolitical contestation, the rise of India, beginning of Modi regime, India breaking through the Nehru Gandhian glass wall, and then rise of Xi Jinping, and then the return of interest of America. The US was so consistent, the Obama, Trump to Biden are so consistent on their Indo-Pacific strategies. So we are
Sure.
seeing that we are sucked into that vortex. And Sri Lanka, so it's an internal political shock, internal economic shock, as well as a geopolitical exogenous shock. So that is
Sure.
how Sri Lankan polity was framed in that 10 years. And then you had the additional Easter Sunday attacks and COVID-19. That's where we are as a
Sure.
small state.
But yeah, but in a certain way, while maybe internally a lot of things have sort of got reconciled, the reconstruction development has happened in northern Sri Lanka. Although there is always this concern of the civil society that militarization of northern areas is something that should worry everyone. But that apart, there is also the constant pressure in Sri Lanka about what we call the human rights lobby and the UNHRC, saying that there was no justice done to the victims of the civil war, especially the Tamil victims. That pressure is still on. And in that sense, Sri Lanka is not out of the woods yet. How does the civil society in Sri Lanka and the government deal with that kind of pressure? What do you see happening in the coming months and years on that front?
I think, Nitin, one major result of this recession of the global, that liberal thing was also the breaking apart of the traditional political forces globally. So in India, it was the same thing. In France, in Britain, in US, and in Sri Lanka, it was the same thing. So what resulted in the failure of good governance was the hurriedly set up political platform which is now governing the country. So what I'm going to tell you is Sri Lanka is also being governed by a new political force, which may sound good, but the challenge in such circumstances is that it's one of the challenges. It's the same challenge France is facing. It's that getting together a coherent political voice even within the governing party. That is a
Right.
challenge. So that challenge translates into policy making as well. So that is why I think Sri Lanka is viewed as, in certain ways, like the militarization debate and the debate on human rights. So I think one of the major challenges Sri Lanka is facing currently, I think, is more than external, is the internal thing. How the current administration of Gotabaya Rajapaksa can unite their own governance governing structure, the political forces, because that's the challenge when any new political force is in power. I think that's something the president is trying to address to a certain extent. In the first phase of dealing with COVID outbreak, it was very clear the government managed to put that front together, but I think what is not going right is that I think there are too many political individual forces which are at play. So I think now what the president is trying to do is to get that into a central mechanism where the president is trying hard to centralize the political decision making. Because you have to give some space to the president. He's a political novice, and he's been challenged, and he's facing unprecedented challenge because of the last 2 years. People were confident. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. He could have dealt with the issues of last 10 years, with his experience. But dealing with the issues of the last 2 years is
Is
where
a big challenge.
it's
It's a big
challenge.
challenge for them. Yes, in fact,
But it's not a challenge he's facing alone. It's the same challenge Trump faced the same challenge. Macron is facing the same challenge. Prime Minister Modi is facing. So I think Indian viewers should see it from that positionality,
I,
which is something people are not seeing things.
I get what you're saying saying that for a new political dispensation to deal with the old issues as well as the new issues is going to be a
Yes.
challenge to try and meet the challenges together.
Yes.
But coming back to the Tamil sentiment, how do you see Tamils in Sri Lanka uh, sort of reacting to the current dispensation and also the long-term effect of maybe some lingering doubts about the country itself and the majority Sinalis. Have they reconciled themselves to now looking back and saying, okay, whatever happened has happened, let's move on? Do you get that feeling as far as
Yeah, I
Tamils in
think so. There are two things happening simultaneously. The majority view towards minorities. There was especially Tamil Sri Lanka. The Tamil single relations I think are at a really good good footing. Uh, but the northern politics, not one of the biggest issues for Sri Lanka is there is a major disintegration in the northern traditional political forces as well. It's also the same thing that has happened in the south. That disintegration has created so many political forces that are, to a certain extent, working to destabilize the peace and unity that was achieved in 2009 and 2010. Unfortunately, that is
right.
but that is a reality the presidency and the government has to accept. If it is being neglected, that might lead to serious problems in the long run, right? So again, in the north and east, it's not the communities that are at a friction point. It's the political forces who are trying to outdo each other, which is
Outmaneuver each other.
outmaneuver as well as gain the rather big political voice. See, in the south also there was an attempt by extremists, but I think the president has managed it very well. Because at the beginning people tried to accuse him of being extreme, and he has shown he's not. He has accommodated, he has brought in, and he has a very strong, strong men in his cabinet who are from minorities, both
Right.
Tamil and Muslim. So I think he probably has to take it on head on. If not, the north and east politics will consume itself because of this internal bickering among the community politicians, right? And that will leave space for a lot of external intervention as well, which is totally unnecessary at this particular point. So as I said, the new condition uh, is not the Sri Lankan single Tamil relations, but the challenge, especially with the Easter Sunday attacks, was the relation between the Muslim community and the singular community. But I think there also you can see finally the Sri Lankan government has come to terms and has realized that this should not go on. They have silenced almost all the extremists in the south as well, even among the Sinhala community. Now you don't see protests from Sinhala, Ravana Balavegya, Podu Balavegya. This is not existent. So
True.
I think that silencing of those extremists will help to heal. If not, there was a time, you remember 2 years back, people suddenly had posters on their three-wheelers, on the vehicles, single extremism was on the rise. I think one good thing COVID-19 has done is help the administration to take it down, to deter that. But as you know, we are not just in a pandemic, we are facing an infodemic. But the infodemic is the bigger challenge for the government rather than the pandemic. I
I
think
think
the
good. It's a very good point, and I think on that note, I want to say this: that Sri Lanka has endured a lot of pain, a lot of destabilization, and a very unstable kind of a period. But I think it can look forward to next 10 years where it can progress far better and far faster than it has in the past 20 years or so. I think on that note, I want to thank you for giving us a very different perspective because not normally people look at it from very black and white perspective, but you've given us a very nuanced understanding of what's happening in Sri Lanka. Thank you for your time, Arinda, and thank you for your insights. We
thanks.
will meet again. whenever these
Thank you.
programs or these incidents or events do occur or we have an occasion, we will come back to you. But for the
Yeah.
moment, thank you very much for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thank you. So I'm glad you are giving the small state perspective also here. That's needed very much in this time. Thank you so
No, no,
much.
it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure, and thank you for joining again. Thank you, and do keep watching StratNews Global. Do keep subscribing to our YouTube channel. You know what the address is, and our social media handles are, of course, well known to you. Do follow them and keep sending feedback. We will welcome suggestions and comments, and we'll come back to you with more on such programs on StratNews Global. Keep watching StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale.